Happy holidays. Our team is off until January 3rd. In the meantime, we're running some episodes from this year that you might have missed. See you in 2023.
Quite frankly, I can honestly say that I've had the ride of a lifetime.
The bow tie. The big man. The boss. These are some of the ways John Honderich was referred to at 1 Yonge Street, the home of the Toronto Star. Last Saturday, John Honderich passed away suddenly from a heart attack. He was 75. In recent days, he's been called a lion of Canadian journalism, a city builder, philanthropist, newspaperman, a journalist. He was also a father, grandfather, and great friend to many people who are aching from his loss. There's been a lot written about John, and today we're going to hear from some friends and reporters and why we at the Star and many people throughout the city and country are grieving his loss. John Honderich was born into a newspaper family. He attended university for law and, surprisingly, for a time, initially avoided the Star, where his father, Beelan Honderich, left behind his own incredible legacy. He started as a copyboy and night reporter at the Ottawa Citizen, and eventually joined the Star, where he worked his way up, eventually working as editor, publisher, and eventually chair of Torstar. John lived and breathed the Star, and his lifetime of journalism culminated in a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Canadian Journalism Foundation. Here's Kathy English, former public editor at the Star and another longtime reporter.
My warmest memories of John are just that great big smile, the way he'd stride into a room and sort of command attention. In 2019, he received the CJF's Lifetime Achievement Award, which is a really big deal. It's a prestigious award. John was nominated by many people who wrote strong letters suggesting why he should be honored. And, I've since seen people on Twitter talking about that evening that John said it was one of the best nights of his life. And that makes me so happy to know how happy he was. And he was happy because he won, a very prestigious award. He held court over a room of some 500 people. But John was also very excited because that's the night the Raptors won their first championship. And he was a huge Raptors fan.
But for everyone who knew him, it was the hands-on and nitty-gritty of journalism that he truly loved.
It has been my incredible fortune to have worked with an extraordinary group of colleagues. Editors, managing editors, editorial page editors, reporters, photographers, designers, columnists. They are some of the greats of Canadian journalism. And when you work with the greats of Canadian journalism, it is an incredible honor.
Here's Tony Wong, the Star's former TV critic and a longtime reporter, who also counted John as a friend.
His name was Honderich. He was guaranteed a room in the C-suite. It's equivalent of a Rockefeller saying, I'm going to be a plumber and then work my way up. Nobody does that. Which newspaper publisher, you can't name one who actually sweated the details and appreciated the craft of journalism. And I'm really grateful for him to do that.
This is Kevin Donovan, the Star's chief investigative reporter, who, when John was editor, sent him on foreign assignment.
I did cover the Gulf War in 91 and the Afghanistan conflict and 10 years later in 2001. And John sent me to both of those. And we had conversations on the big couch in his office where he asked me if I was willing to go into danger and report for the Star. And I said, absolutely. And I recall I was in the field in 91 and I had to write my stories out in longhand and I paid a guy to fax them back from Saudi Arabia to the Star. And John stood at the fax machine. It would have been, I guess, probably in the middle of the night and received each page, read it, and walked it over to the copy desk. And that's something that with a time, was obviously a senior executive at the Star, that's the sort of hands-on treatment that John Honderich did. And I really am going to miss him.
If there is a theme throughout John's professional life, it's that journalism worth doing is worth doing whatever the cost. Here's Jim Rankin, a longtime reporter and photographer at the Star.
The Race and Crime series, which was published in 2002, was a major team effort, and there's 5 journalists working on it. Librarian was involved. We had a data analyst involved. It was a major investment in journalism, and John was the publisher at the time, and it was very controversial. We got hold of police data that allowed us to look at patterns in how police were treating people based on skin color. And we found that, in certain circumstances, people who were Black were treated more harshly than people who were white. So we published this thing and, it caused a major stir. The police association called for a boycott of the Toronto Star. They sued us for $2.7 billion with a B, billion. And John, through it all, was totally supportive. And interesting story, the police took us all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. So it cost a lot of money to do that series. And John was so proud of that effort. He remarked to a journalism school class, that it cost the Star millions of dollars to do that series. And he said to himself, was it worth it? And he said, you bet it was.
John treated every section as the same, and he put his money where his mouth is. Back in the 90s, the travel section had a boycott, an advertising boycott, and advertisers backed out because there was a negative review about the Dominican Republic. And John essentially said, we're not going to give in.
Well, John Honderich always had our back in all the stories we did. And yeah, some of them are controversial, whether they be my charity investigations, the Rob Ford crack video story and everything surrounding that. And when you do these stories, you get a lot of pushback from readers, from people who don't like us poking around in stories that we consider to be of public interest. And 100% John had our back for that. And we couldn't do these stories without that sort of support.
Our tradition of crusading journalism, concern for the little guy, what does it mean to Metro? And most important of all, investigative reporting. And I must say, it is that tradition that I am most proud of having built on. Quality journalism. It is what I believe in so profoundly.
While he loved journalism, he was a man of many passions and sought out joy and good times with the people who were close to him. He loved to have his finger on the pulse. This is Sally Armstrong, a renowned journalist and contemporary and friend of John's.
I think the reason his name resonates is because he's so much about justice. He's so much about fairness. He's that guy. I mean, if you meet him, if you have lunch with him, if you go to the ballet with him, it's not usually about food or dance. It's John wants to know what's going on. He wants to talk about how the Raptors did last night. He wants to know what the problem is with the TTC. He wants to gossip about the politicians. He wants to know about ISIS, for God's sakes. He's that guy. And, when I look back over all the many, many years that I've known him, and others have known him longer, but he was one of the first to be a champion for the voices of women. He's that guy. He's so plugged in, but beneath the chit chat and the gossip and the fun, there's that tremendous sense of justice and fairness. And everybody knows that about John. He has tremendous interest in other people. He loves to know the news story, but he always searches for the personal story. He knows when people are in trouble. He knows when someone's been hurt. And he's that guy. And everyone will tell you that as well, that he'll reach out. Because, we see John, as you said, larger than life, the big boss, all of that. But he's one of the most vulnerable people I've ever known. He was very vulnerable to people who said things about him that weren't true. And he's very vulnerable to people who wanted to put him down.
That sentiment about helping people is something that Gilbert Nagabo knows firsthand. A reporter at the Star, Gilbert met John in Rwanda.
We met when he came to Rwanda. I was in my undergrad and he spoke to my class. This was 2007. And he was talking to us about press freedom and, the media, how it's supposed to work and this and that. But I was, on top of being a student, I also had a job of being his fixer. So I was supposed to be showing him around in town. So that's how we came to know each other very closely. And we became friends right away. He asked me what I wanted to do in life. And I said, I would appreciate getting a master's degree. He said, okay. You apply for any schools. If you get accepted, I will help you with a scholarship. And I applied several schools. Ryerson accepted me. I showed him my acceptance letter. He's like, that's it. I'm going to pay for your school fees and you can come over and study. And I came over and he has been around. He's been like a father figure to me, not just professionally, but also in personal life. It was my first time seeing the snow. He was the person who to show me which kind of jacket to buy that is appropriate for the weather. I didn't know how to drive. He showed me how to apply for my license. He even taught me how to go into the car and, go on the road and try to drive. I have some pictures of him and I on the water in Georgian Bay on his boats and all the stuff. He taught me how to play tennis. He was really involved and he helped me become the man I am today. John was somebody who had a big heart. I think people didn't really appreciate how big his heart was. Like if he wanted to help you, he was going to go all the way. And he was driven by this desire to make a difference in people's lives. He had a big heart. He wanted to get everywhere. He wanted to get involved in people's lives. People know his accolades in the journalism world, whatever, everything that he did in the media industry. But like deep down, he had a big heart and he wanted to make a difference in people's lives. And that's what he did. I think that's going to be a big legacy for his life.
He used to call me on my birthday. I don't even remember how he even knows my birthday, but I would get an email, I'd get a phone call. He was that thoughtful. He was just the most decent, humane boss you could ever ask for. And that's actually why I stuck around so long at the Star. He was one of the main reasons. He really walked the walk and he talked the talk.
We'll be right back. He was a big man with an even bigger heart, and his joy amongst the people he loved and spent time with is something that will also be remembered, particularly at his beloved Georgian Bay cottage.
In terms of the journalism, I'll always remember John for the crusades that he led, including the racial profiling by police and all that. But there's personal stories that will probably stick with me longer. I remember him as a great pie maker. He baked a mean pie and, was very, very, very proud to show off his baking skills. And he loved life at his cottage, especially with his family, and was a very generous host and made you feel at home. And, John had money, but it didn't feel like he ever, was showy about it. He just was really generous and welcoming and a great, great host, like I said, kick back with a cigar and some scotch. And that's how I will remember him probably best.
I don't think I ever ate one of his famous pies, but I've certainly eaten a turkey he made, which he claimed, and he could be boastful about his cooking, was the best turkey you've ever eaten.
The other thing about John, my God, how he loved this country, how he loved Georgian Bay. I have a cottage in New Brunswick, and he came not long ago, and he just wanted to know everything about it. And why are the sandbars like this? And is this true? Such and such happened on this body of water. He's that guy. He loves the country, and the country was lucky to have him.
I'm going to miss seeing John in the water at Georgian Bay in the middle of July. That image of him jumping into the lake, in the morning and then swimming like 20 minutes nonstop and then coming back out and grabbing a coffee or the newspaper and sitting on the deck and talking about, how life was great. And, that's something I'm going to miss a lot about him. He loved life. He lived like somebody who was going to live until he's like 200 years old. And to imagine that he's gone just suddenly, it's heartbreaking. It's really, really heartbreaking.
So as I leave you tonight, I would like to put forward this challenge to you. Think not on what journalism has done for you, but rather ask what you might do to make quality journalism thrive in Canada.
John Honderich was a beloved family man whose loss is being grieved immensely by those that knew him best. Honderich leaves behind his sister Mary, his brother David, his son Robin, his daughter Emily, and his two grandsons, Sebastian and George. A small private funeral for family was held on Thursday, February 10th. A public celebration of life will be held at a later date. And in remembrance of John's life, the family asked that any charitable donations be made to the John Honderich City Builder Fund through United Way Greater Toronto. That's at www.uwgta.org/John Honderich.